Hi there. Today's mini lecture is the case of Marbury versus Madison in 1803. This is one of the most important cases in all of American history, and it came to the court dealing with the election of 1800. Very, very political time. You had the beginning of political parties at this time. The sitting president was John Adams. He was a Federalist, and there was a Federalist in the executive, Federalist in the legislature, and there were Federalist judges at the very beginning of our country. Now, in 1800, Thomas Jefferson created a new political faction and party called the Democratic Republicans. And in the election of 1800, the Federalists were swamped in all of the two branches. Thomas Jefferson, of course, won the presidency, and Democratic Republicans won in the legislative branch. There was a period of time between the time of the election and the time where the Jefferson's people in administration took office. This is called a lame duck period. Lame duck, L-A-M-E-D-U-C-K. That means that period where you have been defeated, but you're still in office. So the Federalists wanted to block further Democratic Republican inroads into the administration, into the government. And so the Federalist legislature created a number of courts. Adams appointed a number of midnight judges here, and there were about 44 judges and 16 circuit judges appointed right at the midnight hour, the last hours of the Adams administration. So they were created by the legislature, appointed by the president, Federalist, and the commissions were all signed. You've heard the term signed, sealed, and delivered. They were signed. They had the great seal of the United States affixed to them, and most of them were delivered. However, the Secretary of State, the old Federalist Secretary of State, before the Adams administration ended, was a guy named John Marshall. And he just didn't get out on his horse in the rain and the March weather at that time and deliver the commissions to a man named William Marbury, who had been appointed by Adams as a Justice of the Peace in Washington, D.C. There were several others that had the same problem. So the Federalists go out of power, Jefferson's people come in, and James Madison becomes the new Secretary of State. And he finds the commissions on the table in the State Department. And he looks at them and he says, "We don't want any more Federalists in our administration." He says they cling to us like fleas to an old blanket, ready to ruin the works of republicanism. And so they throw the commissions in the trash and never deliver them. Well, William Marbury is still looking for his job. He wants to start working, and so do the others. So they come to Madison and ask to be instated and get the commissions. Jefferson says, "No, don't do it. I don't want any more Federalists." So they file a lawsuit. Now, when you file a lawsuit, you don't just say, "I've been hurt." You've got to find some law that's going to support you. So they looked at the law. These were all lawyers. And so they looked at the law and they found that in 1789, right at the very beginning, just as the Constitution was adopted, the Congress, the first Congress, had passed a law called the Judiciary Act, which created the lower court system. Remember, you have one Supreme Court and such courts, lower courts, as the Congress shall from time to time ordain and establish. So the Judiciary Act created those courts. There was a section 13 of that act which gave the Supreme Court the power to issue writs of Mandamus. If you speak Spanish, you probably already know what this word means, or if you're a Latin speaker, you certainly know what it means. In Spanish, mandar, to command. So, writs of mandamus is a court order ordering a government official to do his duty, to commit an act of responsibility that's something that's supposed to be done. That's a writ of mandamus. So they see this in Section 13, and they base their lawsuit on that. So they come to, and they file the lawsuit, and it says this: they ask the Supreme Court of the United States to issue a writ of mandamus ordering Thomas Jefferson and James Madison to deliver the commissions. Okay. Well, you've got a new Supreme Court. It's made up of some midnight judges, and the Chief Justice, ironically, this is one of those weird, ironic things of history, is John Marshall, the same guy who was the Secretary of State under Adams who didn't deliver the commissions in the first place. And he's moved over. He's been appointed as a midnight Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So you have a Federalist court, and basically they say this: we have a real dilemma. If we order Madison, William Marbury against James Madison, if we order Madison to deliver the commissions, Jefferson will just say, remember, he's the enforcer, we're not doing it. And it will make the court look weaker. And the court was very interested in maintaining its balance with the other two branches. If we say, okay, Marbury doesn't deserve a commission, the court will look weak. So they didn't do either one. They didn't even order anything. What they did was they looked at Section 13 of the Judiciary Act. And for the very first time, they performed judicial review. Now look at this. Section 13 of the Judiciary Act allowed the Supreme Court to have original jurisdiction over this writ of mandamus. Marbury came directly to the Supreme Court. He did not go to a district court, to a court of appeal. He went directly to the Supreme Court. So what the justices there did on that court, under John Marshall as Chief Justice, was this. They looked at the Judiciary Act, Section 13, and they said, here's the law. We have original jurisdiction to issue a writ of mandamus. What does the Constitution say? It says that in the Supreme Court only has original jurisdiction where states are suing each other or where ambassadors, consuls, and public ministers are involved. In all other cases, they have appellate jurisdiction. In other words, you have to start at the bottom and move to the Supreme Court. So here's the Constitution. Here's the law. Is it the same? No. So what they did was they said the Section 13 of the Judiciary Act is unconstitutional and we cannot enforce it. So here are the questions in the case. It was a unanimous decision written by John Marshall himself. He wrote the majority opinion. Was Marbury entitled to a commission? He said yes, certainly is. It was signed, sealed, and delivered. He's entitled. Does the law grant Marbury a remedy? Yes, it does. Is the remedy writs of mandamus from the Supreme Court? No, for the reasons I outlined. Does the court have the right of judicial review in acts of Congress? Yes, they do. Can Congress expand the scope of the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction? No. The only way you can change the Constitution is by a constitutional amendment, not a law of Congress. So this super important case gave the court the power of judicial review. Now, they didn't really start using it very much for about 50 more years. The next huge case that came up was Dred Scott. Very important case. So have a look at that one as well. So remember this case. It's a fascinating look at how cases are looked at in the Supreme Court. But remember, this is what the court does. It looks at the Constitution, looks at the laws, and sees if they go together. I hope you understand this, and I hope you come to love the law. Thanks a lot.